Good evening, everyone. This is Rob Bell, and you are watching Getting the Record Straight. Um, it's good to be back. I took a week off and I wasn't able to get the person that person stood me up. So we'll have to make that show up. But at any rate, it's good to be back. I have a great guest with me who I'll introduce in a second. Please take time to like, subscribe, and share when you watch this. Things have been going well in that regard, so keep it moving for me. As I said, this is Getting the Record Straight, and this is the Black Rock and Soul edition. So this is when we do our music and arts and talk with people who are making a contribution in that regard. Before I get to my guest, just want to send out our condolences. Of course, being in Philly, we take seriously people who have been stars and contributed a lot to the community. And of course, Cody Anderson, the great radio icon, passed away. I think it's been 2 weeks now, as did another radio icon. The brother used to host The Quiet Storm, Tony Brown, passed away, and that's a great loss also. And in terms of musicians, Ralph Peterson, I just saw passed away, if not yesterday, the day before. Great percussionist and drummer. So to all of them, we want to send out our condolences to the families. I'm really at a loss for words today, because one of the musical icons to me, a real legend from that great music period of the 70s, is with me today. Sometimes we talk about one-hit wonders and flashes in the pan, but this sister was the real deal. And like I said, an icon, one of the most unique, passionate, and dynamic voices and sounds of any you would hear from that era of the 70s. I'm talking about Miss Maxayn Lewis, and she's here with me. And like I said, sometimes we talk about people, just being here for a minute and they have one hit, but the music that she put out was just awesome, and everybody knew that this was a great voice, and that it would never end. But somehow we didn't. She was here today, and then a few years later we didn't hear from her, and she's going to tell us all about what she's been doing. But she's still, even though it was just a few albums that Maxayn put out, but they were so awesome that they're still remembered and revered by many of us today. So I know I'm getting a little bit wordy, but Maxayn, thanks so much for joining us, Maxayn Lewis.
Thank you for having me, Robert. I'm excited. I love Philadelphia, and I was just mentioning before, Philadelphia, the WDAS, those jocks on that station were so wonderful and warm and kind and generous to us. And the city just embraced us as well. And so that's one of our favorite. That was one of my. It still is one of my favorite cities to go and play. There's a huge appreciation for authentic, original music in Philadelphia, and that was never lost on us. We loved going there. So thank you for having me.
We love our music here, and it's a great city for music. We've had, we've nurtured our own and brought up some really, some really great people have come out of here. And of course, this is home of Philly International. So, doesn't get any better than that. So you're a singer, musician, songwriter, producer. You've pretty much done it all. And like I said, really one of the most gifted and unique sounds ever. So how did that get started? I was doing a little research before we got on, and it seemed like you had, a fair amount of training, music training coming up. Is that right?
I went to I attended a music conservatory
Mm.
The majority of my school growing up years in school life, I went to 2 schools every day. I went to regular school, public school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I'm from.
Mhm.
And then there was this incredible school um, that was owned by a musical, very well educated Black family. Tulsa, a lot of people may not know, but it was extremely segregated. It is the home of the Black Wall Street. If anybody knows that
Sure, sure.
history, it's a lot of that. A lot of history is coming up about Oklahoma and the many Black towns that they had in it, and that they had Black towns, but it was very divided. One of the most successful in America, many states, some states had all Black towns because of segregation, you know, enforced by law.
Mhm.
And so Tulsa was one of the crown jewels of that era for Black um, enterprise and
Mhm.
for successful Black people. And of course, we know it got attacked and all that. Well, in the aftermath of that, that was way before my time. They rebuilt that area down there, and it became another bustling business district. And some of my relatives had businesses there. My dad and my dad's side,
Mhm.
and my mom's side as well. So when I was a kid, I spent time down there at my aunt's beauty salon and going to my dad's cousin's restaurant and that kind of thing. And it was a different kind of life, but it was wonderful. I went to all Black schools growing up, Black teachers, Black students. We never saw any white people at all unless they were lost or something like that. And somebody would always come out and say, "Excuse me, sir, are you lost? Where are you trying to get to?" You know, if somebody was like driving on our street looking around or something, people would come out and ask them if they needed help, you know, that kind of thing. But how this got, so that was my early music, you know, from my earliest life memories. Like I wanted to play the piano. I remembered songs that I heard on the radio. I could sit and listen to the radio like on my porch when I was a little kid. Just, I loved it, you
Mhm.
know, just listening to the music that they played on the radio. And I learned the songs and I wanted to play them. But this was like when I was 3 or 4 years old. And then my mom decided that because I was drawing piano keys on everything that if I got crayons, I drew a piano keyboard. I don't know why, whatever that is. And she told my dad, "I think we should put her in music school because she keeps drawing this same thing over and over again." You know? And so I immediately went into that school, and it was like, to me, like I had arrived at some heavenly place, you know, because they had pianos everywhere, instruments everywhere, and people were learning to actually read music and play music. And that was my thing. So every day after school, I would go do that from elementary school all the way to high school. And when I graduated when I went to college a couple of years, I I didn't want to major in music because I'd already pretty much learned everything I could learn as far as I could go with going to classes for music. So I thought, oh, well, I'll just take general education, that kind of thing. But I went to Oklahoma State University at first, and then I'm here. I had a racial encounter there that just turned me off from wanting to be at that school. And so I checked out of that. And then I went on the road with Ike and Tina Turner and did a bunch of stuff and traveled and toured. And I came back and then I did a blues tour. And when I was on the blues tour with Bobby Blue Bland, that's when I met Andre Lewis and Marlo Henderson. They came out to our gig in Chicago, and they they were friends with the guy who was the band leader or the MD for Bobby Bland. They knew him, and they said, "We want to talk to your singer." And so it said, who is Ernie Fields Jr. And if you look that name up, Ernie Fields, you'll realize his dad had a big band and was pretty famous back in the day, way back in the day. And he was from Tulsa as well. And I met them. But before I met them, I met Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway was at the same gig, that same night at the same place. And he came to me and he gave me his card and he talked to me and told me that he was a record producer. Of course, I already knew who he was, but I just was like, just stunned that he was talking to me. I was like, to my mind was going, this is Donny Hathaway. Oh my God, you know, but he was like, and so when he said he was going to have to do some traveling, but he would call me and there were no cell phones. So I gave him my mom's and dad's phone number at my home in Tulsa. That's the only thing I could do. And then, of course, we know that he didn't make it. He went to New York and the rest is history with that. But Andre and Marlo said, after he walked away from me, they were standing there and I was like, I didn't know who they were. And then Ernie walks up and says, this is Andre and Marlo, and they play with in a rock band. And I looked at them and they looked like they were from another planet, the way they were dressed, how they looked, the whole thing, because here we were on the R&B circuit and they were doing something else with Buddy Miles that I had never experienced. So I was like, wow, what is this gonna be? And they said, well, you can go with that guy in the three-piece suit, or you can come with us and go to space. Space? And I was like, okay, I'll do it. But then a couple of weeks later, they sent me a ticket. I ended up driving there with some friends who were leaving from San Francisco, who stopped in Oklahoma. And then I said, well, I was gonna go to the East Coast. Oh, we'll give you a ride to Chicago so we can hang out for a while. So we drove to Chicago and then I took a flight to Boston. And then I stayed there and I started working with them and we started writing songs. We started just doing, because they were on tour off and on with Buddy Miles and he was at the top of his game. And this is when he was really at the peak coming, his career was just exploding. So they were doing really super well and going everywhere, every day, every week. So I would still be there at this big, huge mansion writing songs. And it was like a dream. It was really like a dream. I couldn't even, you can't make it up. How cool it was. And so that's how we started it. And then later on, we didn't know what was going to happen with it. We was just doing the songs. And then they knew a lot of people. And some of those people came to us and said, okay, we want to sign you. We're going to make you, help you do a record. Luther Dixon, who was a famous songwriter. We met him in Florida and he was like, okay, I'm gonna put up the money for you to do it. Then people did demos. They don't do demos anymore, but we actually went to Record Plant in New York. And that's where it wasn't a demo anymore. To me, I thought, well, this is a major studio. Let's really do this. And that's what we did. And then Capricorn Records contacted us. And that's how it all got started.
Well, just back up a little bit for a second. Okay. And talk a little bit about, I don't want you to stay there too long, but just, I mean, you went over Ike and Tina Turner pretty quickly. And, you know, I mean, that's quite a bit right then and there. What impact did they have on you in terms of your professional, because you're talking about really the beginning of your professional career.
Well, I'll tell you, it was like going to the University of how to be in the business. I met them at that time. They were also at their peak, you know, like really their career was exploding all over the world. They were worldwide as well. And when we went to Europe, that was my first real professional gig doing this. And I didn't know anything. I was just green coming from my mom and dad's house, and I was gonna go out and do this. I made them come to my home and tell my mom and dad what we were gonna do and what I wanted with it. And they said, I said, would you do that? And they said, sure. So after they were playing in Tulsa, and then they loaded up the big tour bus and drove up in the middle of the night in front of our home. And all the neighbors looked out the window and were like, what is going on? You know, and they had, of course, it was a tour bus with all their name emblazoned on the side and in the front. And it was like a moment. People were standing in their yards in their gowns and robes and looking like, what is going on? You know, and I thought, and my father was like, okay, so here you go, but you know, you can always come home. So, but he talked to Ike for 45 minutes in his, my dad had his own like office room at our house, and he talked to Ike for about 45 minutes, nobody else in the room. I never knew what was said in that room. But Ike loved my dad. He thought my dad was like an amazing person. And he always said that. And this is before all of the hearsay and the stuff that you've heard. I know all the juicy gossiping tidbits that you heard. But when I joined that group, it was business. It was like an education. Ike would make us read contracts and learn what that legal language meant, what a writer means. So that he said, so we're all doing this together, and we have to, you're supposed to know, don't just walk into a place blindly. If you don't see things that they're supposed to be, as it is indicated in our contract, then you should let me know if I missed that. Because I'm looking too, but we're all working together. He was very business-like all the way. You couldn't beat him getting up early in the morning to be downstairs ready to go. And everybody, we worked really hard. And because that show is like a real dancing, singing, high energy kind of thing. So in the evening, he would get a big suite for all the girls, because we were just young people. And he was like very much like a father over everyone, even the guys. Like he would be like, we don't have time and energy to go out partying. We have to be up early because we have to move out and we have a show to do and we have a long way to go. So there was I didn't go to any after hours clubs and hang out with people. We didn't get to do any of that, which was actually the right thing to do. Because we did work really hard. He would go to sleep. If he heard us giggling, like he'd be walking up and down the hall, we'd be in there talking, but he just knock on the door. Like, okay, girls, better go to sleep because we got a long day tomorrow. And we would, okay. And then we just, everybody like, okay, take our makeup off, put our hair in, do the, and then go to sleep. But I learned so much from both of them, Ike and Tina. And they were consummate professionals at what they were doing. They looked beautiful every day, and they demanded that we did too. Nobody could walk around like with do-rags on or anything. Your nails had to be done, your hair had to be in place when you got off the bus just to go eat some food at a truck stop. You had to not be dressed up, but you had to be pulled together and look presentable. And we were on time. And he also talked to us about something that's really important that I'm watching people which has been the downfall of many stars across the spectrum, is that he made sure that we were well paid, but he made sure that we paid our taxes. He said, this will be the undoing of you if you don't do this. So make this be a habit that you keep. Take care of this business because it will undermine everything else if you don't. So when it was tax time, he would have a tax guy come to the hotel and then be in a suite, and you'd go in there with all your receipts and sit down and file your taxes.
Wow.
And that he set that precedent. Everybody had to do that. He said, because this will be your undoing. And then I've watched, as I've grown up in this business, a lot of people have come undone because of non-payment of taxes. That's the main thing that gets people. And you can see that happening now with a very famous orange man. Taxes are a big deal.
Right,
so
absolutely.
I learned that from them, and just how to take care of yourself, eat healthy, I mean, nobody was like teetotaling, drinking and doing that kind of thing. Drugs, no, none, because it was not, uh, even marijuana wasn't tolerated. You know,
Mhm.
in that day, it was like, no, you don't have anything on this bus that's illegal like that. And for good reason. It was really, we were in the South, we were traveling through the South, and a lot of those state troopers in the South are, you know, corn-fed, you know, corn cob pipe smoking, you know, Smokey the Bears, you know what I mean? They're really tough. And if they'd see like a whole bus full of black, young black people, they pull us over and harass us on, you know,
Mm.
a
All
lot.
right, well, let's jump back up to the band Maxayn. And, you know, when I listen to the music now, it's so fresh, it's so timely, it's so, and I'm just wondering how you described it, that, you know, even back then, because, you know, there were like so many styles of things, music going on in the early 70s. You know, was that transition out of the 60s. So you had like the black arts movement, you know, uh, jazz was, you know, jazz artists were doing a bunch of different things, becoming
Yes.
more accessible. Some, many of them. You had the funk movement, you know, you have rock, and it seems like you could do it all, you know. And
Well, we
so
considered ourselves,
how did you see yourselves?
we considered ourselves to be a funk fusion band,
Uh-huh.
fusion, and we wanted to um, push the envelope, push the boundaries in every direction. Um, and that was also not just a time for people to trying to come up with, you know, new sound, new grooves, new things. There was also Andre, I will say, was very important to this. Andre and Marlo Henderson, because they were electronic wizards.
Mhm.
I mean, for real. That was the other thing that they knew. They knew because Buddy had played with Jimi Hendrix.
Sure.
Jimi Hendrix was an electronic wizard as well. Many of the things that you see guitarists using today, like those when they have the board on the floor, the pedal boards on the floor with all the effects, a
Mhm.
lot of those things were actually invented by Jimi Hendrix.
Mhm.
And so they were very much, Andre and Marlo um, were very, that a lot of the sound and the instrumentation and trying new instruments. And at that time, there was a company called Roland Instruments that had never made any inroads into American music market. And they contacted us because they thought we were so different and we were making sounds in the studio with anything we could find. And he said, they came to us and said, hey, what if you had some,
You're
and they introduced us to um, they introduced us to their SH-101, their their synthesizers. And this is before synthesizers were used anywhere. In fact, they picked our band to be the band that introduced their their electronic instruments in America to recording. And we made our second album was that one of those albums that we made using Roland instruments, and it had never been, and nobody knew what Roland was. And so we introduced those instruments and introduced them to players. I mean, so many famous players. They knew who Andre and Marlo were. They knew who they were, and they had a lot of respect in the industry from George Duke and just so many other people. I mean, Stanley, just you name it. These people knew who they were. And so when they saw, and Andre was such a, a prodigy when he was a kid growing up as an instrumentalist. He could play bass, he could play guitar, he could play keyboards, he played everything, but keyboards was his, he really got into synthesizers and
Mhm.
soundscape. And that is what set us apart. And he and Marlo were really a big part of that. And we wanted to be on the cutting edge. We wanted to be not just the cutting edge, we wanted to be the leading edge. And that was part of the thing.
See, that's the thing, like I was trying to say in the beginning, was, you hear about people who have a hit and, it kind of falls apart right after that. You had 3 tremendous albums. And, I think if somebody had taken like a poll of who's the next super group, you had to have been considered, I would think anyway, as one of those bands. And so, and then we don't hear from you. So what happened?
Well, I didn't just fall off the edge. We did our gigs, we did our tours, we did our recordings, and then Capricorn started, I don't know, we don't know what was happening with them because we were here in California and Capricorn is actually out of Georgia. So a lot of people thought we were from Georgia because Capricorn Records was the label with Phil Walden and Frank Fenter was in Macon, Georgia. But we never went to Macon. We were just, they came out here and signed us in California. And so, but they started to have like whatever was going on with them. We don't know all the ins and outs of that because we weren't privy to what was happening with their company. They had some other people on that label too. And they started to get rocky, we didn't know. And then then Capricorn Records was going away and that was the end of that. So that's how we didn't get dropped like some artists did. Just the label just folded for whatever reason, but we weren't privy to that information. But then Andre decided to do the Mondre project. So I worked with him on that. And he made his albums and, and did his thing. And I wrote some stuff with him and arranged stuff for him because I play keyboards too. So we had a lot of music going on. And so then we started to branch out. He worked with Frank Zappa. He worked with The Who. He did a lot of stuff with other bands, like big name bands. I said big name brands, but about the same
difference, right?
I was introduced by a singer named Vanetta Fields into doing a lot of white rock music with Sammy Hagar, Steve Marriott, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, a bunch of stuff. It just kept rolling. And then I ended up doing a tour with Frank Zappa as well. The short tour, we went to Europe, did some stuff. I learned a lot working with him. And it just, from there, it's like, okay, I do this, I do a job. And people always go, well, how did you get to do all this stuff? But I'd never auditioned for anything. I would have if somebody said, well, if you want this job, you got to audition, but nobody ever did that. People would call me on the phone and say, well, let me say what this was based on. It wasn't just like, oh, let's just get that girl. It wasn't like that. Like I said, we wanted to be the leading edge as Maxayn, the band. One of the things that we did that I decided, I was just sitting there one day, I didn't know anything about multi-track recording. And I was asking the engineer, a guy named Jack Adams from New York. And I said, Jack, we were at the record plant here in Los Angeles. I said, tell me how this works, because I don't know these machines. And he said, oh, this is a 24-track machine. And he showed me how the heads press against the magnetic tape, the whole thing, how you can record one little track like this, and then you can add another one. I said, so I could sing harmony with myself. And he said, yeah, you could, but you probably won't be able to do it because you don't know where it would be. Now, this is before digital. So this is all analog, and you couldn't see like you can on digital and Pro Tools and those kind of programs now, you can see exactly when a note is played and how long it goes on and where it stops. Well, you can read where you can see the sound.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't see the sound in analog. You could hear it, but you didn't. So, but because I do everything counting in my head,
Mm-hmm.
like because in order to, like some people say it's the feel of something, but everything has a count. Everything has a count on it. And I learned that in music school. So even speaking, even has a cadence,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So I said, let me try it. And he said, okay. I said, I bet I can sing harmony to a track we were working on. And he said, okay. So it's just he and I in the studio at Record Plant. And I said, okay, I did one part. I said, okay, now go back and let me sing another part. He goes, how do you know where it's going to start? I said, because I'm going to count. He goes,
Hold that thought 1 second. Had to get
there
my,
you are.
yeah, the light.
Yeah, there you are. That's better.
Okay.
And he said, hold that. So he says, okay. So, okay, you can count it. You can remember where to come in, where to stop. Go, yeah, I just sang it. I can do it. So I did it and I sang these harmonies. And then he played it all back. And then somebody walked in and said, wow, where are the singers? He said, it's nobody. It's nobody. It's just her. She just did it. Nobody had ever done that before. So he went down the hall and brought all these other engineers in to listen to what I just did. And people were, I didn't think it was that important.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like playing with the machine. And he was like, no, this is like, nobody does that unless they have another person singing with them.
Mm-hmm.
Then they can sing together. But you just sang like 4-part harmony and it all is really super tight. And you did it with counting. I was like, yeah, counting. You just count it. And I knew where it came in. So that started a whole thing. That when I didn't have any idea that people were going to talk about that in the community of music makers. And so that I would go places and meet. I remember meeting Jean Carn for the first time. And I was like, oh, wow, Jean Carn, right? And I said, wow, I'm so pleased to meet you. And I put out my hand to shake her hand. She goes like, you sang all those harmonies on your own by yourself? You did? That's the first thing she said. And I was like, yeah, I did. And then every singer as I would meet other professional singers who were famous or who were popular, they would ask me about it. How did you do that? How did you do that?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I said, it's kind of like a fluke, but there is a method to it that I use that worked for me. But you have to make it work for you because again, we didn't have the digital tools that we have now that make all of this like piece of cake. But then it was really something different. So from that, I got calls to do work with Donna Summer, record all this stuff. It was crazy because of just doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And people knowing about that and go, oh yeah, let's get her to do that. Let's get her to do that. And I got some incredible calls to work with just about so many people that I admired, like working with part of the Bee Gees and and that kind of thing. It was just amazing. So
you mentioned Jean Carn, another Philly reference. But when I think about her, that what she was doing, Doug and Jean Carn and
yes,
some of the early stuff here, it just kind of reminds me, I kind of fit you. You're not, obviously we're not the same, but it was that genre, that kind of unique sound, revolutionary sound as far as I'm concerned, that was going on at that time, that you represented a certain style of that, like you said, that kind of funkier fusion style, but it was just so much, with such a vibrant time. I mean, you
Oh
know.
yeah, everybody was so many people were doing all kinds of, trying all kinds of things,
Mhm.
and everybody was just going for it,
Right.
and um, there was no particular style you had to be in, and that we
Mhm.
wanted to push those boundaries, because I always thought having those, like in Billboard magazine, how they have the charts all set up. First
Mhm.
it was R&B, and then became urban, then it
Mhm.
was dance, and just these labels. But basically, those labels were just another kind of uh, racism.
Mhm.
Those labels, how they tried to
Segregate. Mhm.
segregate the music, and
Mhm.
I hated the term crossover.
Yeah.
Can you cross over? That's like that's like moving the goalpost around, for people to have a career, make a living at this, doing what they love. It just kept um, Black artists, in a position of being being considered less than, even though they were fantastic. And
Absolutely. And
so,
you mentioned, when we started out talking about WDAS and radio, and see, radio was so much freer and creative, and the DJs used to play stuff, from everywhere, man. And I can remember, just back in the day. Well, I remember, I wrote a book some time ago, about 15 years ago, called The Myth of Rock and Roll, the Racial Politics of American Popular Music. But one of the guys I interviewed, who was a DJ, said that, he said, we had the freedom, to make up the playlist. You know what I mean? We could kind of go from, one extreme to the other. And they did that, and you identified with that. And it is really a problem now, and it has been for
well,
well over a decade.
the thing is, they when white media noticed, took note that Black radio was so powerful and so creative, and when when the young white generation started to really want to, the music they wanted to hear was on Black radio, instead of like because what was on Black radio rarely got crossed over into white radio, which just sounds so crazy because it's just sound and
Mhm.
music. But this is the divisions, the lines were drawn not by us,
Mhm.
but by them. And when they realized that, they set about to destroy Black radio, and you could see it happening. And
Yeah.
and of course, someone like me, because I've lived long enough to see what the difference is. Um, I was sort of putting out a warning sign. I was like, you guys, if you're not careful, you're going to lose Black radio. And if you lose Black radio, then they're going to be able to what they want to do is control. They want to control even our music.
Mhm.
They don't want to let us have our own communication, our own news outlets, our own music, and having personalities, which the DJs did have,
Mhm.
and people listened to them, and they sort of like drew everyone together. That was a rallying place for us, to listen, to hear stuff that um, because had a Black DJs had this thing of really wanting to, like the Quiet Storm. It wasn't just him playing music. It was him doing things and saying things that were uplifting and gratifying, and confirming our greatness.
And
And
there was a
that's what,
great respect and reverence for
yeah,
artists and
absolutely.
musicians,
That's
and of
right. And
course
we
the
felt,
music.
and the musicians and artists, we felt so like honored, like to be included and be in that. So that be so that it became like crossover was like didn't mean anything.
Mhm.
Who cares? because we have this. But now it's like, they totally wiped that out. And so that's a great loss. And I think we need to get, now that we have the internet, I think that we can get back to a lot of that building community building on a national and internet and global scale,
Yeah.
because people are listening to us no matter what. And you don't have to go through Clear Channel or somewhere to get somebody, some executive program director to go like, oh no, we don't like this line in that song, so we're not going to play it. I remember the Isley Brothers had a song called All This Bullshit Going Down.
Right. Yep. Yep.
And they didn't want to play it on the radio, and it was like, on and on. But it was like we were in the trenches. We also had this awareness about what was happening in the Black community. That was part of it too, and what was happening in America. So it was a very a time of people being aware and wanting to make themselves known as being in the trenches together. And there was a kind of a coming together that was really amazing too, with all of the artists that were out there. And we all loved each other. And it wasn't like so much a competition as it was like a gathering. Yeah. We were all on one, because they used to have big shows and a lot of artists would be on the lineup. Well, it wouldn't be like, oh, we're gonna try and kill them and do that. It was none of that. It was like, whoa, okay, we love them too, And so it was just like a big family reunion of sorts kind of thing. And it was really fun.
So take us up to now. You have done some really interesting things, not the least of which was the Ma Rainey project, right?
Yes. Yeah. Again, I was just on a summer day sitting at home, and I get a phone call, and it was Branford Marsalis. And he goes, hey, Maxayn, this is Branford. And I go, okay. And he goes, so you want to do some vintage blues? And I'm like, yes, of course, because I love the blues. And that's something that I learned from Bobby Bland, and also from his orchestrator, a gentleman named Joseph Scott, who was just an amazing musician and a very wise sage about music and the business of it and performing it and being a better musician. You should always go for being at the top of your game. And he really inspired me about that, talking about big bands and that kind of thing, because Bobby Bland had a big band traveling with him. And it was so interesting, the things I learned about music, just from how to be more tasteful and really choose. It's not, sometimes he would say, it's not the notes you sing, it's the notes you don't sing. Now it's what you don't do. So really focus on those kind of things, and that just builds you into a better artist. And I learned those things, but I don't want to rattle on about it. But anyway.
So the movie, Branford calls you, and
yes.
Then what happened? And so
and he says, okay, well, I want you to learn these songs. Are you familiar with who Ma Rainey is? And I said, yeah, sure. Because I would love to do something like that. I didn't know it was going to be a movie. At first he just said it was, learn these songs and we're going to record them. And then later on, I found out, before I went to New Orleans to record, that it was going to be for a film. And then all the rest of it was unfolded. Viola Davis, Chadwick Boseman, Glenn Turman, the whole thing, George Wolfe, like, whoa, this is going to be something important. At least it's going to get some notice, because I love Viola Davis. Yeah. And I love all of those people who are acting in this, who are, working in this film. And Branford Marsalis is an incredible leader in music leader. He really is, and a really kind person, and very generous within himself, like to get the best out of everybody. And it was so relaxed and so much fun. And Mr. George Wolfe was there to give me the backstory on what kind of mood every song was going to have in it, and what was going to be happening, what his vision was. And he was wonderful. His energy is just electric. He's just on fire, you know, and passionate. And it was wonderful. I loved meeting him. I had never met him before. And so working on it, doing that it was really fun. I want to say this too about blues, because a lot of times I hear people go like, well, they always talk about blues like it's something you can fall back on. And they don't give blues its righteous place of being really the root of so many things, as opposed to something you can just fall back on. And everybody cannot do blues. They can't sing it because they sing in the wrong place, and they play in the wrong place. So a lot of artists that are considered to be big blues players in the industry now, across the board, many of them play in the wrong place, the phrases fall in the wrong place, and the singers sing in the wrong place, even though they're playing blues chords and blues, you know, blues changes, but they're in the wrong place. And I learned that from Joe Scott. That was one of the things, like, because Bobby Bland was like one of the premier, they called him a Rolls Royce blues singer. And his phrasing was just amazing where he was, and he was so relaxed and just calm. And of course he was, you know, he grew up in the industry, and he was an older man when I met him and worked with them and opened for him. He was a gentleman, and he knew what he was doing. His feathers were never ruffled. And he would just, well, we'll work that out. Everything was he was just calm and cool. And I learned a lot from them as well. So, but that's what I got to do. And the more I had read and studied Ma Rainey, along with Mamie Smith and Bessie Smith. Mamie Smith was the first Black woman blues artist to record in America. She was of no relation to Bessie Smith, but those ladies were friends with Ma Rainey, and they were path cutters for everything that's happening even now. And there's a line in August Wilson's play where Ma Rainey says, they don't care about me. They just want my voice. The people that are running this industry that we're in. And I'm just, she was just trying to hold on to her own and not lose her footing and do that. And in a lot of ways, the music industry for Black women has not changed much. And for us they keep trying to rob us of our power and our rights to do things, the flow of energy to just do what we want to do and try out new things and be, if you're a creative, really creative, they just want to, if you look a certain way, then they want to make something for you and create you as an artist. But they don't want, they sort of like shy away from, I'm talking about the industry, they shy away from women who can produce, write, and perform. They don't want to give you so much free reign to do that as they would for men who are in the industry. But that battle still goes on. You know?
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure listening to you, learning from you for this past hour. I really, really, really appreciate you taking the time out and sharing with us. And I just want to say to everybody who watches this, if you haven't heard Maxayn, if you've forgotten, go back and get some of her stuff, some of the albums. I'm sure they're still available. And of course, you can hear her on my playlist on Black Rock and Soul playlist because I'm always playing her. But again, thanks so much. It's really been a pleasure. And is there anything else you're doing and anything we should be looking forward to that might be on the horizon?
Well, yes. Here in LA, we have a band. I have a band that I work with. It's called the Homemade Cookies, and which we just started out to do something because we didn't want. We're here in LA. We have been, some things you could do. Go and play live and just get exercise, just to keep active. With Bobby Watson, who used to be bass player for Rufus, and Alan Hines, who is a mutual friend to Bobby and I, and we've both worked with him in different configurations, like with Bobby Caldwell and Randy Crawford and that kind of thing. Great guitarist. And we decided we would make this band just for fun. It was just a fun thing, and it has blossomed into being a thing. And now we have an album that we're just finishing up that's going to have some incredible special guest on there joining us because they wanted to be in on it with us. It was just because we were just trying to do originally a live stream program that would be interesting, and it has just blossomed into being a recording project, and it's going to be probably getting finished up in the next couple of months. So it'll be Maxayn Lewis and the Homemade Cookies, which is just we're just doing songs that we love. And so it's a whole thing. So it's really a cool thing and a lot of fun, and it's really turned out great.
Well, we'll be looking for it. So again, thanks so much. God bless you, and
Thank you.
keep doing your thing.
Thank you for having me, Robert. I love Philly, and I'm really happy to do this with you. And I love the people that still love our music and write to me and just show me a lot of love all the time. Many people go, "Oh, I love this. I still love that. I still have that." They send me pictures of records that they still own, that kind of thing. And it's just it really stokes my spirit and keeps me going. And I'm not ready to retire yet. I'm still
Show
having
the cover of the one you have. Which one is that you have?
This is the Maxayn Legacy package.
Oh, okay.
It's called Maxayn Reloaded. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, and you can still get this on. I think it's available on Amazon. You can still get it, and it has all 3 albums.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah.
And it has a booklet in it with a biography, and then it has all 3 albums on CDs.
All right.
So that are in there in the covers with the So
I gotta get my hands on that.
And I will tell you, the company that put this together is Cherry Red Records out of the UK, and they remastered it, and it is, I have to say, with the new technology, it came out incredible. Okay. So when you listen to it, you'll hear stuff you didn't hear before because of the digital, processing that they could do with it without changing the character of it. They did a bang up job on it. Right. So.
Well, again, thanks so much. And, we'll be looking for that.